Well, welcome to PJNET live here from our our new home. This is the studio that Sunbelt Girl and myself built after midnight last night. I hope you enjoy the new setup. This has been something that I have shared with you for the past 3 years, and we are making steady progress every day. But we've got an exciting show tonight. I've had a chance to speak with Refugee, who is in the green room as we speak. Now, I must tell you that Refugee is one of the most brilliant analytical minds that I know. However, when it comes to simple things, well, he broke the tripod. So tonight's broadcast is being brought to you by way of a camera duct taped to the broken tripod. But Refugee, good to have you on. Looks like you got a fresh shave since the last time I saw you.
Man, you got this new beautiful studio and I'm running on duct tape.
Duct tape is an American icon.
Duct tape is an American icon. There's actually a guy in the French Quarter that sells duct tape trucker wallets. And he sits there and makes all kind of things out of duct tape and so on and so forth. It's pretty entertaining stuff. Look at your setup now, though.
Yeah, I don't watch television, okay, but from time to time I will be walking through a room and there's a show. It's a really stupid show, Naked and Afraid or something, and this girl built a bra. Build a bikini, basically.
My kind of show.
Ooh, that would hurt, though, wouldn't it? don't try that at home, folks. So, anyway, it's been a great week, and I think that we really missed you last week, Roger. And in one way, I was kind of worried about you. In another way, I was just thinking, man, you try to help a guy out, and he skips town, but you lost your phone. You have a new phone. That's the good news.
Got a new phone, and so yeah. Not only did I lose my phone, but the person who stole my phone actually, and this was because I did not secure my phone properly. My fault. But
duct tape's a good thing. You should duct tape it to you.
And they were inside my Google account, and they changed the name. They changed my password information on my Google account. And so I couldn't get into my own Google account. I didn't have any phone numbers. I didn't have any email addresses. All my contacts were gone. Everything. So so it was a big mess getting it straightened out. But we got it straightened out, and we're rearing to go this week.
All right. So you've had a chance to meditate. You've had 2 weeks to prepare, and we were talking earlier. And an issue that you have from the very first time. Early in meeting you, you made the claim that I found to be, well, I was kind of offended by it. I was hurt by it. It was shocking, and I discredited it. But we're going to go ahead and go there. We are already in a post-constitutional America. Is that your theory?
Correct. That is my theory. And I really felt that way after Obamacare was upheld by the Supreme Court. And it wasn't just that Obamacare itself was unconstitutional. It was that the way in which the legislation was passed, everything about it was unconstitutional. And I came up with my own theory for how to try to deal with things and how to try to resurrect things at that time. And in fact, that's where Refugee came from. And what I was talking about, it was funny because it was slightly before the major refugee crisis, but it almost fits even more so now. Because I was calling myself American refugee because I was saying, I don't recognize my country anymore. I feel like a refugee in my own country, walking around looking at just how fundamentally different of a place we're becoming so incredibly quickly.
And it worked out so good on Twitter, sometimes referred to as Twitler here lately, because you had at and then American, M-E-R-I.
American refugee.
So it kind of visually looks like American,
Yeah,
Refugee. But,
exactly. So American Refugee, which is where I am on Twitter. And I'm going to start trying to wake up that Twitter account, Mark. I took some time off, and the combination of me taking some time off as well as shadow banning, that account, despite the number of followers it has, doesn't really have the reach that it used to have.
right.
So I'm going to start doing some work on that, both cutting loose the deadwood and everything like that, and seeing what I can do to start getting the message out a little bit more. Because Mark, we are in a fight for our country. And even though I think it's post-constitutional America, that doesn't mean I don't want to bring constitutional America back. But what the next series of shows really is going to be about is why I think we're in post-constitutional America and what I think is appropriate to do to get back there. Because, Mark, let me tell you what one of the problems is. When you're the only one playing by the rules, you'll lose. Okay? And what's happened is that conservatives are the only ones playing by the rules. Liberals aren't playing by the rules anymore. Liberals are, the Constitution means whatever we say it means. And they have every intention, they've made it clear, they have every intention, were they to take control of the Senate in the next election, as well as hold the House, as well as take the White House, they have every intention of doing away with the filibuster, and they have every intention in by legislation increasing the number of Supreme Court justices from 9 to 13. And letting the next Democratic president appoint four new liberal Supreme Court justices, and then just turning us into a full-out satanic, socialist tyranny, basically, is the direction that they're going in. And some people think it's harsh. And some people think, oh, if we don't play by the rules, we slip to their level. But there's a couple places I want to go with that. Even our founding fathers understood that this time might come, okay? Thomas Jefferson, real complicated. I mean, just a complicated guy, Mark. If you ever want to read a brilliant man, you read Jefferson, but also a complicated man, a man who had great character attributes and also great flaws. Very, very, very human guy. But he talked about the fact that he didn't necessarily seeing the form of government lasting more than 40 or 50 years. Okay. And he talked about not being afraid of revolution, and the tree of liberty needing to be watered from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Now, I'm not talking about armed insurrection or anything of that nature. But I am talking about realizing that we're in a certain world where things don't work anymore, and there's a reason why they don't work. I go to a couple of things. Another one of our great founding fathers, Adams, actually in his discussions with Jefferson over whether or not the country was going to make it. And yeah, before I give the quote, let me say something, because I know that the word religious has come to mean so many things to so many different people. And to some people, the word religious now is a negative term, and to other people, it's a positive term. At the time that this country was founded, when people used the term religious, they essentially meant being moral, well-disciplined, and worshiping God. Okay, so being moral, well-disciplined, and worshiping God was the idea. It was not the idea of, that they were going to promote ritual over relationship or this or that or the other.
Yeah, that wasn't so much a theological context.
Right. So don't let the word religion turn you off. But
don't lose your place. Don't lose your place. But let me inject a couple of comments before I forget them. See, you have the benefits of having thought about this. You mentioned some great thinkers in our founding fathers. When I was studying sociology, one of the more liberal theologians, is not theologian literally, but spokespersons of liberal political thought was named Robert Dahl, D-A-H-L. He had 5 points that are essential for any now he said democratic. We're actually a republic, but in the broad sense, a free, governed by law. He had 5 rules that were necessary for the perpetuate or sustainability of a democracy, as he called it. And the very first one was procedural consensus.
Hmm.
Okay, and this is what you said when, there has to be, imagine playing a football game where we just don't agree on what the rules are. Imagine
Right.
playing a game of cards where we just make up the rules as we go. You
And it's
can't.
simple, and it comes down to as simple as that on this first point, because what we used to understand in this country is that the Constitution says what the Constitution says. It means what it means. And if
Well,
you want to change that, it gives you a process for changing that, and we all agreed on the rules. But at some point,
there's the difference between interpretation, okay, and and literal. But here, let me before I only had 2 points. I'll let you. I hope you remember where you tied your horse.
I remember where it was.
When you say post-Constitution America, that's very disturbing to me. But I'm going to say something that is equally as disturbing. I think both are true. We are literally in a post-truth culture. Literally,
Mark, we're in a
post-truth.
post-Judeo-Christian culture.
Well, now, I actually had 3 points, but imagine, I saw a billboard today screaming in downtown Tallahassee, abortion is reproductive health care. I was going to take a picture of it, but the light turned green, and I couldn't. But it literally screams out, abortion is... And it's got a picture of 2 young women with their arms around their mother. And I thought, huh? We are in a culture that denies the fact that men are men and women are women. I mean, what could be more simple and more basic? I mean, what's next? Are we going to deny gravity? So,
Right.
third point, and then I'll turn it back over to you. So don't lose your place.
Oh, well.
There are examples of secular cultures, such as Sweden, that are they're secular, you might even say pagan, but they're not based on any moral or religious underpinning as their foundation. Okay? And they are sometimes heralded as an example of how we, the basic, the Western European model where everybody is free and and the government owns this is the Obama utopia. But Sweden is not in chaos. It's not burning in flames. Heck, the group ABBA came from there. They can't be all bad, right?
Well, first of all, Sweden has its own set of problems. Secondly, Sweden actually is more capitalist than people realize.
Well, that's because their little experiment failed.
Right. And let me tell you something about all these Western democracies, okay, as they like to call themselves. They were completely dependent on a successful United States of America. They were able to exist because America existed. And because America existed, tyrants couldn't roll over them.
Right.
Oh, okay. That's why they were able to do their little things without spending money on their own militaries. Okay?
They slept under the blanket of protection that we provided militarily.
Absolutely. They absolutely did. And so that's one of the reasons that they were able to survive and that they were able to exist.
I saw a bumper sticker today, a military guy, on his truck. I walk the walk so you can talk the talk. And that's kind of the way we were walking the walk, they were talking the talk.
Right. So, Mark, another one that, back to those fundamental things, John Adams basically said, well, he exactly said that our Constitution was designed for a moral and religious people and was wholly inadequate for any other. And he literally expressed concerns in his letters. He loved what we had created. He loved the republic we had created. And, he thought it was going to be the greatest experiment in human history. But he had some concerns about our level of freedom. And he said, will this people remain a moral and religious people? Because if they don't, this Constitution will no longer work. That, our Constitution basically only works if people admit what the meaning of the word is. And it only works if they admit what a man and what a woman are. And it only works if we're fundamentally honest people. Okay. And it only works if we're a hard working people. it was designed for that. A Frenchman, Alex de Tocqueville, and everybody should read Alex de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. He made a couple of big points. He comes, I think it's around 1726, that area, late 1720s, when he comes on his tour of America. And he's coming because the world is pretty baffled by America at that point.
Which is still a colony at this point.
Well, no. It's 50. Excuse me. It's 50 years after that. It's 1820. It's 18. It's 50 years after that. So America is basically 50 years old, and we are starting to dominate the world stage economically. And people from all over the world are immigrating to the United States. And he kind of came here to say, what is this? What is this? Why is it working? Mm-hmm. And he came over and he studied our Constitution, and he traveled the landscape and everything else. And while he was impressed with our Constitution, he did not think that was the main thing that was making it work. And he pointed out two things. One, he said, America is shockingly educated. And what he was talking about wasn't degreed. Okay, today we have this tendency, when you look at political coverage, they'll talk about uneducated voters, and they're calling the uneducated voters people without college degrees, and they're calling the educated voters people with college degrees. Okay, what he was talking about is people who could A, read, B, write, had read the Bible, understood the civics of the country, knew the way that our system of government worked, understood critical thinking. And he was talking about mountain men that hadn't graduated high school, and some of them spelled dog phonetically. Some of them spelled it D-A-W-G in the South, okay? But they knew their Bible. They could think critically. They could communicate. They understood about the three branches of government. They understood about how our system worked, and he found that unique. He also found the spirituality of America unique, and what was going on in our churches. And he basically said it's their level of education, and it's their level of morality that is making this work. That's why the system is working, that hasn't quite worked in other places the way they're doing things there. And and of course at that time, we were a constitutional republic, and we technically are a constitutional republic. We used democratic means to accomplish certain things. But, Mark, in a total democracy, you basically, it's almost like anarchy. It's mob rule. There's nothing that's consistent. 51%, 50.1 can change everything at any time. And in our system of government, there were guaranteed rights set down. This is the way it's going to be. This is the rule book in our Constitution. Yes, the Constitution can change, but it took what? An extended majority, a super majority over time to change the Constitution, because you had to get these huge majorities in the House and in the Senate, and get this huge majority. There has to be
a lot of consensus, because just like
there had to be a lot of consensus. You weren't just going to get whims going back and forth.
Well, and think about, you told the story about when you lost your phone. The first thing the person that got it did was change the rules, okay? Went into your account and locked you out. Now, this is the problem with a pure democracy. And the best example, the illustration is, if there's three of us here and two of those three want my bicycle, majority rules. They get my bike.
There is a quote that's attributed to Benjamin Franklin. It might have been different because the word lunch probably wasn't in use at the time that he was alive, but it's largely attributed to Franklin. It's been around for years and years. And the quote is this: a democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for lunch. Liberty is a very well-armed sheep contesting the vote. Okay.
Well, and the way they put together the three branches of government, we have the House of Representatives, which in a pure democratic sense, our elected representative, theoretically it shouldn't matter, should it? Because they are simply our voice. They will cast their vote in accordance with the people that they represent. So if the people want to legalize marijuana for recreational use, even if the elected official is against it, theoretically, the elected official in the House of Representatives should vote according to the will of the people he represents, not his own. Now, that's on that side of the scales. On the other side of the scale is the Senate.
Yes.
Now, the Senate is not the people's house. It is a deliberative body. So if the U.S.
It's a
House,
deliberative body, they're supposed to deliberate, and they're supposed to decide what they think would be best for their individual state and what they think would be best for their country.
Right. It is a really, deliberative body. Big difference. Huge difference.
Big difference. And look at what they did. And it's really the separation of powers that had made us so great, because they didn't just divide us into three branches of government. They took one branch of government, the legislative branch, and they split it in two with a bicameral, Congress, with the House of Representatives and the Senate. When people complain about gridlock, we were supposed to have gridlock. The idea was, we think we have this thing figured out, so we're going to make it really hard to change anything, so that people, because it's going to take consensus that people have really figured out, okay, we really need to make this change in order for something to change. Whereas the progressive philosophy is one of constant change. Tomorrow's values are always better than yesterday's values. We are in a constant state of change, and really a lack of respect for tradition, a lack of respect for heritage. That's really what progressivism is all about.
Well, the very term itself, progressive. Karl Marx said that history itself is on the side of the progressives, that there is a natural historical progression toward this utopia that he envisioned. Now, I was having a conversation with a liberal co-worker of mine. We have some pretty interesting conversations, very respectful, but he said he didn't like being referred to as the left. He preferred progressive, because progress, is the root word. And I said, his name is Dallas. I said, Dallas, I can plant you a beautiful flower garden and leave it alone, and it will progressively get grown over with weeds.
Right.
And he kind of thought,
Buckley, the great William Buckley, one of the fathers of the conservative movement, before the term progressive was as popular as the word liberal and and communist and this and that and the other, but he understood it perfectly when he said, essentially, a conservative is a person standing on a mountaintop screaming, "Stop!" Okay, and and he understood that. Okay, but let me move it along a little bit, because I want to get into kind of the core of my thesis, and this is gonna involve a number of shows. We're gonna do a series of shows, not only exposing the problem, but talking about what we need to do to get our culture back, talking about what we need to do to get our country back, and talking about what we need to do to, I would say, resurrect America and resurrect constitutionalism. One of the things that I'm going to argue is that we are essentially now, yes, post-constitutional America, and that we're in a state of war. We're in a state of open warfare. We're in a state where there's a war on men, there's a war on gender, there's a war on the Constitution, there's a war on states' rights, there's a war on our Second Amendment freedoms, there's a war on the unborn, and we have to start acting like we're at war. And this won't be the first time we've ever done it. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War. Now, I have this incredibly mixed opinion of Lincoln, okay, who kind of like I do of Jefferson, great man with flaws. But habeas corpus talks about, the right of a person to be able to go before a judge, for a writ to go before a judge, so you can't just arrest people and hold them for no reason. Lincoln suspended that during the Civil War. Lincoln basically said, this is about preserving the Union. In fact, to him, it was much more about preserving the Union than it was slavery. He made very clear that if he thought he could end slavery, that if he thought he could preserve the Union without ending slavery, he would do it. Okay. But it was about preserving the Union, and he literally, as president, just started suspending aspects of the constitutional government, essentially being what one might argue tyrannical. Okay. But he made the decision that we were at a time of crisis. We were in civil war, and the normal times didn't play. What did we do during World War II, Mark? Now, whether we made apologies for it later in times of peace or not, what did we do during World War II? We
actually interned Japanese just because they were Orientals.
Yeah, and you know what, Mark? We probably stopped some terrorist attacks And let me say right now, I don't hate Japanese people. And there were some great Japanese serving in the military. And there were some Japanese who were great Americans who were unfortunately interred. But illegal immigrants and first generation Japanese citizens were interred because we had legitimate fears that they would be more loyal to Japan.
We had fear. The legitimate, but in a time of war, okay, by the time you figure out you're wrong, it's too late. And this is one of the problems I have with the doves who want to disarm and have peace and all that. And it's like, well, that sounds really good. The problem is if you're wrong, by the time we figure that out, we're defeated and we're all dead or enslaved. So I think we kind of, and I'm not making an excuse for, but in times of war, rights are suspended. Okay, basic rights. In fact, the Patriot Act, okay, is very much an infringement of our constitutional freedoms.
Very much so. And you can easily oppose it from a purely libertarian perspective. You know, very, very, very easy to do. There are some great patriots who do. But we made a call as a country that, you know, a couple of buildings had just been knocked down. They tried to fly something into the White House, and, you know, things were too hardcore. Things were too hardcore. We can't be the only ones playing by the rules. The liberals are not playing by the rules. Let me tell you what happened in Congress today, just today. Now, it is illegal for illegal aliens or for non-U.S. citizens to vote in federal elections. There's no federal law about that with the states. And some of these liberal states have started making moves to allow not only immigrants, but illegal aliens to vote in their federal elections. And the last Congress had started making moves to literally prevent that, first to discourage it very heavily. They were even looking into what federal legislation could be passed, but also starting to pass things like that would penalize these states with federal aid and so on and so forth if they did anything like that. The Democrats passed a resolution today making it very clear that they want all states to make illegal aliens eligible to vote, and that they want to bring more people into the democratic process and grow our democracy. Okay. Now, at the same time as they're doing that, what are they doing? They've set up a system where it's actually more difficult than ever for educated Europeans, Christians that want to come here and start a business, or that have a PhD in a field where there's not a lot of Americans with a PhD to immigrate here, but where they're trying to flood our country with people from the third world that are very uneducated and will immediately be a burden on society because they want to do what? They want to give them the right to vote, and they want to put them on welfare, and they want to buy their support. They're literally, Trump's right that it's an invasion, Mark. And it's why, even after all my analysis of how you could argue it was constitutional, how you could argue it was unconstitutional, what he wants to do in the border, in my opinion, Donald Trump is right with what he wants to do at the border. I hope he ends up being more about action than just show, because if he plays by the rule book on this, they're going to stop it. He eventually has to not play by the rule book. And one of the things that I think we have to do is we have to protect our border. And I think we have to do it. I think it's reached that point where we can't play by the rules anymore. We need to go by any means necessary.
Well, okay. And you know, we talked a long time about that a couple of weeks back, and that's a cogent thought. But one thing that just came to my mind is individual states, particularly I'm thinking Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California, by the same logic that states can register anybody to vote, you know, they can also erect borders themselves. Or
they sure can.
Well, listen, all right, let me get raw here a minute. If the government doesn't do this, what is to stop vigilantes and mercenaries from doing it?
Right.
Let that sink in.
Absolutely. And Mark, you're getting into there's first of all, let me
That's
stop.
dark. I mean, that's scary.
Too much in every topic, but and it's one of the reasons this is going to probably be about a 5-show series, because what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about what needs to happen politically, because there are things we have to do politically, okay, if we want to save this country. We're going to talk about what we have to do educationally, because, Mark, we're not an educated people anymore. And the truth of the matter is, you have only to look at the tests that were required for high school graduation in this country 100 years ago to realize, oh my God, the average high school graduate 100 years ago was far more educated than the average college graduate of today. Okay, this is simply a fact. Our college graduates today might have a technical education in one specific area. Oftentimes they don't even have that, because they got a degree in tapestry and women's studies, and or the history of African influence in Irish folk music. Okay. I mean, no, there's some bizarre degrees out there that these supposedly educated people are getting. So we're going to have to focus on education. We're going to have to focus on politics. Mark, social is a big term, and I haven't 100% decided how to break that down yet, because you've basically got what Michael Savage would call language, borders, and culture. And language, borders, and culture is very important. The religious is a part of that, the religious, the moral, the spiritual, but I think we need to do a show just separately on what we have to do for revival in this country, because spiritual revival and moral and revival is going to be a part of this thing. So, moral revival, language, borders, culture, the social issues, the educational issues, and politics are going to be a part of it. Now, what you just said will tie into the politics, and that's exactly the kind of thing I want the conservative movement to start doing. I want the conservative movement to start saying to the state of Texas, protect your border. I want to start saying to the state of Arizona, protect your border. Now, of course, Arizona made some attempts, and the feds came in and shut them down. But look at what Arizona did after that. They played by the rules. The liberals don't. The liberals just declare sanctuary cities. Okay, you're starting to have some sheriffs that are getting the idea. Some sheriffs are starting to declare their counties, Second Amendment sanctuary cities, and say they will not enforce these anti-gun laws if they get passed by the state. This is the type of political activism that we need to be encouraging, and that absolutely needs to happen if we're going to save the country. Also, Mark, for me, as hard as it was, and even though I didn't vote for Trump last time, for where we are right now, I personally think we have to reelect Donald Trump president. We cannot let a Democrat get in. Look, I hope to get the man that I think is the ideal president at some point. But right now, it's about getting the best we can get who's on our side. And Trump's our guy. Trump's our imperfect guy. Okay. But he is our guy. And the fact that he has kept his word on judges, kept his word on abortion, really, whether he believes it or not, and I hope he believes it, but he's the most pro-life president we've ever had. And he's at least making these moves towards protecting things on the border. Mark, another thing on education I want to say, because I think some people don't realize how bad it is. But even when you look at the ACT and SAT scores that kids are taking to get into college, I'll pull out some research on this on some future shows, but they keep dumbing down the standard so that kids can get the same scores without doing as well on the test, because they're hiding the fact that kids are knowing less and less and less when they're getting into high school.
Let me pile on that. Do you know what the average IQ was when they first came out with the IQ test?
What was it? 100?
100. You know what the average IQ is today?
What is that?
100. You know what the average IQ will be 100 years from now?
100. And why is that, Mark?
Because the normalization of the score, in other words, the average IQ will always be 100. So exactly. that leads to the question, does the person with a 100 IQ today, how would that person compare with the person who had a IQ of 150 years ago? Something to think about.
Right. It's serious business. We are being dumbed down as a society, and the fact of the matter is that's a part of the liberal plan. Mark, they're not even teaching civics in school anymore.
I got thinking about that, folks. We did speak earlier by phone, and I got thinking about that, and I'm doing some work with a group in Alabama, and it gave me an idea. And I've proposed a similar idea, but you've kind of congealed it for me. Why can't we? Okay, we can rent school facilities. They can't stop us.
Absolutely.
What if we went, and I think we're going to have to move more to a local base to make some changes, okay? So I have this idea, and I'm going to toss this around with my collaborators. Let's teach civics in high school after school and go to the school board and get credit. In other words, if you take this course, you don't have to, but if you take this course and pass it, you will get credit. And we need to bring civics back into the schools. If the schools won't do it, we'll just do it. How's that?
And
that would not be hard to do, by the way.
In certain places. But the great thing about it, first of all, when you have a liberal state, even a liberal state has a whole bunch of conservative counties. Okay, so a liberal state will pass these state laws about education, and then in the conservative counties, the kids stop learning about civics. Okay, and even though the liberal state would never let us do that on a statewide basis, the conservative counties would. The conservative counties would, and we can go in and we can start teaching their kids. I'm going to look heavily into and do some research on every now and then, Mark, you run into a principled liberal. And if you want to see a principled liberal, go look at the Tucker Carlson episode when Richard Dreyfuss was on, the actor. Richard Dreyfuss is a liberal. And he went on there and he was, it doesn't matter what the issue is, but he was opposing something that, Tucker was all prepared to argue with him on. But Dreyfuss went straight to the constitutional point of Congress controls the purse. Congress controls the spending, not the president. And he was a pure constitutionalist on it. But then he went in and Tucker ended up saying, well, you're right. And he might not be where we are of the idea of realizing that we're at war yet, but he at least realizes that education is being broken down. And he has a foundation that's all about trying to return civics to the public schools. And he partners with conservatives in trying to do things. Yes. So that's an area where you actually have one of the very few principled liberals, okay, who actually sees something. Mark, I'm going to tell you something. I had a principled liberal that was my 7th grade American history teacher. And his name was Mr. Kevin France. He's the best teacher I ever had in my life. And he would not be a liberal by today's standards at all. By today, he would probably be slightly right of center.
Yeah, he was a JFK Democrat.
When I was in the 7th grade, this guy was considered to be a liberal. Okay, but he was a patriot and he loved the country. And not only, it was a private school, and we were using the same American history book that the public schools used, but he covered it in half a year. Not that he didn't cover it thoroughly. That man would come in on Monday and lecture on chapter 1, and we would take notes like we're in a college class in 7th grade. He would lecture on the 2nd chapter on Tuesday. He would lecture on a 3rd chapter on Wednesday. On Thursday, we would have class discussion of those 3 chapters and preparation for the test that was coming on Friday. The homework on Monday had been to read the 1st, on Tuesday to read the 2nd, on Thursday to read the 3rd. We would show up on Friday, and there'd be 3 essay questions, and he'd say, pick 2. And do a 300-word essay on each one of these. Okay. And you want to talk about learning something. But then what did he do since he covered the book in a half a year? He didn't trust the education people were going to get later on civics. So we spent 9 weeks on civics. We spent a quarter of the year on civics, and he drilled it into us real good. Then we spent the last quarter of the year reading 2 historical novels that were set in the time, basically, of early America, and talking about what life was like in early America through that standpoint. And I left that school in love with the Constitution, in love with America, disagreeing with him on politics, arguing with him about how I did not want Jimmy Carter to be reelected president of the United States. And I was already an early Reagan fan and hoping that Reagan would win the Republican nomination. Okay. But I love that man. And I learned so much. And later on, when I took the ACT test, it had a section on it that doesn't have anymore called social studies. And before they canceled the social studies section, the social studies section became about crap. It became about, again, more about things like the African influence on Irish music. But at that time, the social studies section was mostly civics. And you were scored on a level of 1 to 35. A composite 28 would generally get you a scholarship to a public university at that time. A 33 or a 34 was like Harvard material, and my composite wasn't that great. But I got a 34 on the social studies section of the ACT. And as I was taking the test, I was saying to myself, Mr. France, 7th grade American history is where I learned 90% of what I'm putting down on here. And you know what? The ACT also, like the SAT, like the IQ test, scores in that way. So for me to get a 34, it meant that even then I was in about the 98th percentile. Okay, in my understanding of it. But I had been there since the 7th grade. So we can do this stuff. We can teach this stuff. It's extremely important. And that's one of the things we're going to have to do. Mark, we got to get into the churches. There's got to be spiritual revival in this country. And I want to stay kind of non-denominational with this, but let me say this. The 10 Commandments and the Sermon on the Mount are things that I think everybody can agree on. Okay.
And we need to focus on that. Roger, we have sustained a healthy, respectful relationship, although there is vast differences in our denominational, the way we practice our faith. And I think I want to kind of end on that positive note, because you're right. I've often said our problems really aren't political. They're not economic or judicial or social even. They're actually spiritual. So we might want to save that one until the end. But I like the fact that you brought up it is possible to work with principled liberals. I don't think most, well, I won't use, there's just legions of people who are registered Democratic. The party has veered so far left. I think the party is leaving behind, and they've become rabid in their pursuit of progressivism and socialism. And you may find Democrats, registered Democrats, that we can reach out to and find areas of consensus and work together, because I guess I'm preempting what we may talk about in the future. But Roger, we're probably looking at a 4 to 5 week series. You've brought up education. You've brought up spirituality. You've brought up politics. Where else did we want to go? There's
language, borders, and culture.
Yeah. So I think we're going to have a real good
spirituality, even though we haven't done this on this show before, because I think we need to always start doing it. Let's just close with some prayer this week, because I'd like to close with some prayer this week, and I want to close with prayer every week. And sometimes I might lead it, and sometimes you might lead it, but because we have got to pray for our country, and we've got to pray for our kids. If we have any chance of turning this thing around. Why don't you lead us out in prayer this week?
Why don't you close us in prayer, Roger, and because I've got some monologue afterwards, and just wrap it up in prayer if you don't mind.
I sure will. Dear Lord Jesus Christ in heaven, I believe that your providence had much to do with the founding of this great nation. And I believe that in our history, you have blessed our nation. And when I look at what we've become, and I'm still a patriot, but I'm much more a patriot for what we were than what we are, Lord Jesus Christ. And when I look at what we have become, I don't know how we haven't been wiped off the face of the earth yet. Yeah. But there are those of us in this country that are fighting and praying and believing. I ask you to show us your will. Help us to save our country. Help us to turn our country towards you. Help us to turn our country towards truth. And please, Lord, help us to once again make this a great country. And please, God bless the United States of America.
Amen. Roger, thank you so much for preparing all of this, and we look forward to the weeks ahead. And we'll see you next Friday, brother.
God bless you, Mark. Bye-bye.
All right, there we have American Refugee, and looking forward to this series he has on post-constitutional USA. Although that does sound like kind of a dream. I know we've kind of gone long tonight. Thank you for your patience. I think that we've got some serious topics that require not only our introspection, but also our action. And folks, we're not here just to talk. We're here to make changes. We're here to move the needle. And each of us can be a part of that. I don't want to bore you, but some new stuff has come in. And I am making plans and accelerating those plans to be in Montgomery on the 20th to work with a team of collaborators, including Troy Towns, who you've heard here, including Diana Cruz, who was here last night, to take that educational mountain and climb it and reach the top victorious. That's a tough one. That's a tall mountain to climb, but folks, we have to do it. Gee, let me just do this. Let me take a little liberty. Some stuff came in. I ordered in preparation for just that. So for the boys out there, let me show you this neat thingy. Okay, it's a spool. Okay, it's a spool like this, and it's got a handle and it turns. And you'll notice there are some little circles in the front of it there. Those are microphone jacks. Some are male, some are female. Okay, really cool. And you got it's 50 feet long, folks. And it's got a brake. You know how the spool spins? It's got a little brake. You can clamp it down to where it won't spin anymore. Okay? Check this out. Okay? It's got this big, heavy-duty cable. Okay? This is a man cable. This is tough stuff. So tough. They've even put one of those things. Remember those little things you put your fingers. One person puts a finger in, and you put your finger in. You pull on it, and you can't get your finger. Well, it's got one of those on the end of it. See, it's got the steel cable, and you could literally hang this on a tree, and the weight of the cable would be suspended, and it wouldn't damage the cable. Did they think of everything? Okay, and out the other end of this cable comes all of your microphone connections. Okay, 12 of them. 4 go one direction, and 8 come the other direction. So you can use this to set it up. And they've even color-coded them. You've got 4 that are blue, and they're marked numerically 8765. You've got 4 that are yellow. Okay, and this will be employed in Montgomery, Alabama. And I am doing the engineering, and I'm going to get more and more serious about that. I wasn't really sure I was going to go. But if I can just get off that Wednesday, I will take off Tuesday. I will go up there Tuesday night and get a little rest and get set up Wednesday morning. And then as soon as it's over, I've got to pack it up. We got to get more cameras. We got to get more cables. We've got to get all kind of electrical stuff for the electrons. So it'll be a nice dress rehearsal for this vision of PJNET Live. Now, we're not going to broadcast live from that site, but we will be filming it and putting it together, and we'll be making videos for it. Now, also, welcome to the new studio. I hope this has been, for those of you, Barbara, Sunbelt Girl, and probably Hazards 4, has known for years it has been a dream and a vision of bringing this PJNET virtual studio. Folks, the only thing real that you're looking at right now is me. Everything else is purely electronic and digital imagery, and it is so nice, and I'm just so pleased, so proud that after all this time and all of this effort that we've come this far, but we've got a long way to go, and we're just getting started. And I'm just... it really energizes me, and I hope it energizes you as well. What we're doing here, as Refugee pointed out, is more than just having fellowship and conversation. Folks, we are on a mission to literally move the needle the other way in a culture that I'm showing that tank going pretty much empty. And we got to fight we can't solve it all. But you know what? We can move that needle back in a positive direction, and over time, and we can train up and recruit young people to carry the torch long after we're gone. And that's important to me. It's what drives me. I hope it's what drives you. I certainly want to have fun tonight, and Hazards, get ready to play some tunes, because we do want to have fun on Friday night. But enjoy the fun, because what Bum Phillips, great coach of the then Houston Oilers, said, hard work and good times go hand in hand. Hard work comes first. And I'll leave you with that right here on PJNet Live.